Hello, gentlemen.
Where does a Canadian in Florida on a Sunday morning take in Canada-Sweden hockey?
Well, if you were at the Residence Inn where I was, it was in my room with a bunch of boys, a bunch of the guys who are here down here, and I put together a little bit of a feast for us to eat while we're enjoying the game, and good time was had.
Well, what kind of feast at 7 a.m. in the morning do you lay out for the boys?
Little crepes, some crepes.
A little scrambled eggs, a little grilled cheese, some guacamole,
nice,
some kale.
Well, what the hell is that?
Kale?
What's kale?
Nice.
What the hell is that?
Sid doesn't know what kale
What's
is.
kale?
It's a superfood,
Green
Sid.
vegetable, dude. Yeah, superfood. Take care of yourself.
No, it sounds threatening.
Yeah.
I don't want any part of it.
I shouldn't have expected you to know, right?
No.
I mean,
Listen, I'm
you
open.
and the vegetable aisle aren't friends, right?
I'm open to a lot of things, but kale can take a hike. I'm not interested.
I'm open to a lot of things, but Shi, can you put gravy on it?
It's a good question, Shi. Can you put gravy on kale, or does that kind of defeat the purpose?
No, it's deep fried. Well, the only way to do it, right?
Oh, that's okay. Now, I'll call you after the show. Now we can figure this out. All right, Shi. First things first. Let's talk the Boras story. And for those who haven't seen or read your article on Sportsnet.ca, first off, shame on you because it's really good. Second, Scott Boras has some clients out there that for whatever reason, Stephen Drew, Kendrys Morales, they haven't gotten work. And Shi, for those, I'll let you tell it. For those who haven't read the story, what is Scott Boras saying about how the Jays are handling this offseason? Because it doesn't seem like he's too happy with it.
No, I mean, the gist of it was that he wants the Blue Jays ownership to spend more money, so they need to give the front office a bit more financial flexibility, and that it's they're owned by a big successful company, and that they should spend and act accordingly. So that was the nature of his comments, and it's interesting that with time now with Kendrys Morales and Stephen Drew still sitting out there in free agency, and it's pretty obvious that it's an attempt by him to cajole the Blue Jays perhaps into bidding for one of his clients. And the timing of it is interesting given Alex Anthopoulos just last week saying that any moves or additions were unlikely this spring. But this is par for the course for Scott Boras, who's been pillaring the New York Mets for not spending enough for years.
Let me ask, because it seems, though, that Kendrys Morales and Stephen Drew aren't fits to play for the Jays.
Yeah.
So,
Morales is definitely a redundancy, right?
Right. It's the same thing as Lind.
Move Adam Lind.
Yeah.
But if Stephen Drew were willing to move over to second base, that's interesting.
And has he said, is there any hint that he would? Because for me, obviously, Boras is playing dirty pool. He's played dirty pool for a while. My question is why? Like, neither of his guys really fit for the Jays. Who's he attempting to help? Who's he attempting to throw under the bus? Like, there's a lot to this. There's more to this for me than meets the eye. Because if his two guys don't fit here, then what the hell is he trying to do?
Well, one, it's just Boras being Boras. He wants all teams to spend as much money as possible all the time.
Right.
Because, the theory, that rising tides lifts all boats. So
right.
From that perspective, it makes sense. But, like Stephen Drew, in theory, if the money was right, could come here and play second base. The Blue Jays aren't gonna pay Boris's price for that. And, they can argue whether or not this is an upgrade or not, but Boras doesn't discount, right? So he's trying to have as many teams in play as possible and put as many teams in the conversation as possible. So it seems like, hey, we got to outbid someone else. And maybe he's having trouble doing that. So somehow, way, shape, or form, is trying to pull the Blue Jays into it.
The other part of this, and I'll defend the Jays, which I rarely do, Stephen Drew hasn't played a game at second base in his life at this level. He has not played a game.
But how is that defending the Jays? That's what I don't get.
Well, but why? There is zero fit. Like, I'm defending them in terms of that.
But what I'm saying is Scott Boras knows that.
You would think, right? Like, you would think a guy who's never played, like, you're going to complain about a guy not getting signed to play second base for an organization who's never played second base in the majors, ever.
Peel the onion a little bit. What more is there then?
Did you see the quote in Shi's article from Boras in November, Timmy?
Yeah.
at the GM meetings? For
Of course I read Shy stuff.
I read
Are you questioning me?
I'm not insinuating either way. For those for the one idiot out there who didn't read it, and shame on you, this is Scott Boras, who just ripped the Jays, talking about the Jays last November GM meetings. Said Boras, quote, "They're well armed with a very successful company behind them. Certainly Paul Beeston knows how to put together a winner. There's a process there that's very ready for success." End quote. This guy's sucking and blowing at the same time here, Shi, and I have a hard time taking him seriously.
Well, I mean, but that's the modus operandi, and that's why everyone needs to take the comments with a grain of salt. Now, if he was the representative for Irvin Santana and he spouts off and says, "Hey, you know, the Blue Jays need starting pitching and they're not sending my starter," it would maybe make a bit more sense. But you know, maybe he's maybe he's trying to, you know, voice some support for Irvin Santana and, you know, maybe for the Jays, you know, tepid participation in the talks for Ubaldo Jimenez and all the other free agent pitchers out there. Or maybe he's thinking, you know, a year or two down the line, or maybe even during the draft time, in case the Blue Jays, you know, draft one of his clients or want to make a run at one of his clients in the years to come. Like, hey, you know, time to ante up, boys. Let's do it.
Did he in any way lift the pressure on Alex Anthopoulos by saying what he said?
No, not at all. I mean, again, if the guys were a fit, then I think you can make the argument that, okay, maybe, hey, you know, it's a bit of a challenge comment. But unless you're going to get value for Adam Lind in a trade, and let's remember that Adam Lind is signed to a good contract with club control. It's reasonable value for the level of production that he provides. That, you know, do you want to just bring in Henry Morales, who isn't terrific against left-handed pitchers, which is the flaw in Adam Lind's game, and pay him a lot more money with a lot more guaranteed terms? So I don't know if that makes sense. And then again with Drew, I mean, we talked about it. If you're gonna make a guy convert positions, and Stephen Drew is a tremendous defender. I have no doubt that he'd have a little trouble crossing over, but you don't want to cost him a week and a half or more of spring training of time to work at that transition, and then kind of parachute him in and say, "All right, here, buddy, play this new position."
Shi Davidi here on Tim and Sid. Shi, I think we're all on the same page into what the motives are with Boras, but I think it kind of moves into.
No, we're not.
What are you talking about?
We're not. Continue. We're not on the same page as what motivates Boras.
Well, money motivates Boras. We're on the same page on that. I think we're on the same page there, aren't we?
I don't think so.
Really?
Yeah, just continue with the conversation and we'll talk after, because money motivates.
Money doesn't motivate Scott
No,
Boras.
it does. But in this one, this is what really he has two guys that don't fit, and what he's trying to do is get more money for his two guys that don't fit from a team by ripping the ownership of a team.
But he also knows he has an organization that's feeling a lot of heat.
An agent,
and he's trying to push them into it.
Push them into what? Two guys that don't fit.
He's playing a long game too. You know, I mean, like he's planning. He also is planting seeds, right? And maybe it's just, hey, he's trying to shame them into thinking, hey, you got to behave differently the next offseason.
Right.
But at the end of the day, this is all about the dollar bills. Like, no chance that it's not. That's the root cause. Now, whether it's meant to come to fruition now or help him down the road, we can debate and argue. But at the end of the day, he's trying to convince the Blue Jays that at some point in time, spend more money.
I'll agree with that. But this time around, his motivation seems very curious to me. Like, you rip the ownership of a team and you're an agent.
And you hope they crawl back in 3 days.
And they haven't dealt with you in any way, shape, or form since, 2008, I believe I read in Shi Davidi's column today on sportsnet.ca.
That's a great column.
Yeah, that's right. Brad Wilkerson is the last Boras client that has been on the big league roster. They haven't drafted anyone since James Paxton in 2009, and that didn't work out, and he ended up going back into the draft. He's with the Mariners now. So it's been a long time, and I don't know if it's necessarily an icy relationship, but these are two camps that can't do business together or haven't been able to do business together. And, you know, maybe you're seeing a little bit of that in play as well.
Well, you mentioned something interesting there, Shi, in terms of shaming. The Baltimore Orioles in the last 2 weeks, after doing very little this offseason and taking a lot of heat locally from that media, get Ubaldo Jimenez and Nelson Cruz. I don't know if the Nelson Cruz thing is done, but I just saw over the weekend it's basically done. So in terms of shaming is an interesting thing, and even when you're a corporation of this size, Shi, sometimes it can work for a major league organization. Sometimes when you feel enough heat, it may play into an agent's thought process. I'm not saying it's going to work here, but there are examples in this division where it has recently happened.
Sure, and the Baltimore Orioles would have been feeling heat for a long time because their payroll has not necessarily been commensurate with their market for years and years, and Peter Angelos is notoriously tight-fisted, and this was a team that even more so than the Jays had needs in their starting rotation, and they dragged their heels until finally addressing it, and then they had a need in the outfield too, and they were taking their time with that, and finally they got Nelson Cruz on a very team-friendly contract. So this is by no means unique, and pressure can come from a number of different places. It can come from within the industry in terms of the way you're perceived by the people you're doing business with. It can come from externally from the people who are buying tickets and watching on TV, and it can come from your stakeholders. So he's certainly trying to apply it in a certain way. Whether that ends up making an impact here, I don't think so. If this was an agency the Blue Jays do more business with, then maybe you would read a bit more into it.
Shi Davidi joining us here on Tim and Sid. Anything else you want to get to the Jays? Because I got kind of breaking news.
Oh, no, what you got is important.
Major League Baseball, Shi has officially adopted experimental rule. They're calling it experimental rule 7.13 on home plate collisions. So here is the rule for 2014 being implemented by MLB and MLBPA. A runner attempting to score may not deviate from his direct pathway to the plate in order to initiate contact with the catcher or any other player covering home plate. If a runner attempting to score initiates contact, the umpire can rule that runner out, and same goes for the catcher. Not allowed to block the plate if, in the judgment of the umpire, the catcher, without possession of the ball, blocks the pathway of the runner, the umpire shall call or signal the runner safe. So what we thought was going to be implemented seems as though, and was just handed to us so we can get through it, because there is one bit of wording that caught me there. But it seems like what we thought was going to be implemented was implemented.
And that's really interesting. We were actually, just before you guys phoned, we were talking to Jonah Navarro and Eric Kratz about these rules and a lot of the uncertainty regarding it. And, just I'm reading it in my email right now too, and I don't know that this is going to necessarily alleviate some of the confusion that catchers have. And I'm going to read it more closely after we finish here. But one of two of the key concerns were, what if the ball takes you? The path of the throw means you need to position yourself right where the plate is. How will the umpire? What kind of leeway will catchers have on plays like that? As well, what is this going to do for umpires? Not only do they have to watch for safe or out, but now they have to try and determine runner intent as well, and that's going to be pretty complicated for the umpires. So it's pretty interesting. I think this is going to be a bit of a hot potato, to be honest with you. I think there isn't a lot of time to put this into place. I mean, games are starting on Wednesday, and now catchers have to adapt to it. And not only catchers, base runners and umpires too. I mean, this is going to be really interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, definitely.
So now an umpire at home plate, is he in line? Is the runner in line with home plate? Mm-hmm. Does the catcher have possession? Is the catcher blocking home plate without possession? And if everything's straight, is he out or is he safe?
Yeah, that's the one that got me, because Sid brought it up, is if in the judgment of the umpire, the catcher without possession of the ball blocks the pathway of the runner, the umpire shall call him safe.
This is
now,
tough, man.
What if he has possession of the ball? Is he then allowed to step in front of the plate?
Based on how we're reading this, yes. If he has possession, he can. But what if the ball, what if it's going in the glove?
What if it's not?
What if it's like
close?
This is a powder keg here, Shi. This is gonna be tough.
You know what? I think this is going to be harder on umpires than anyone. Just at a cursory glance, it's like there's already so much pressure and scrutiny on getting the call right at the plate. You add these two variables and don't give them a ton of practice time to try and figure it out. Very, very, very difficult for them. I mean, there's so many different elements to this that lead you to some concern because of the number of variables and that no throws are the same, and catchers of different sizes will look different. Someone who's short and stocky like Dioner DeVaro will be in a different skill division than someone who's tall and big like Eric Kress. And they're different, the natural body motions that would be different because of the size changes. Will that cause illusions for the umpires? Will one person's actions look different than another's? You're right. Powder keg's a good word for it.
Good luck to the guy at home plate working that rule out.
Yeah.
All right, Shi, great stuff. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, man.
Anytime, fellas.
There was Shi Davidi covering the Jays in Dunedin.